Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
This is my top 5 podcasts of 2021. Yesterday, I did my top 5 YouTube shows. These are my top 5 podcasts. These are audio-only podcasts or podcasts that I just choose to listen to, which I still do that, even though I'm working from home. I'm home 100%. I'm not out on the road. I used to drive a lot of Uber and Lyft and all those things, delivering food. So listening to podcasts, I had a much larger subscription base. But as I mentioned in my last episode, the events of the past few years have really changed how some people choose to perceive the world. And because of that, I've had to unsubscribe to a lot of shows. Which I am completely fine with, because there is a plethora of amazing content out there. And this is my top 5. This is my top 5 shows that I love to listen to, podcasts of 2021. Starting off with number 5. This is a show that I've been a huge fan of, subscribed, and I'm off and on with it. And I'm back, and I love it. And this show is a mixture of comedy and history, and that podcast is The Dollop, hosted by Dave Anthony and Gareth Reynolds. It's an American history podcast where Dave Anthony reads a story from history to Gareth Reynolds, who has no idea what the story is about, and it's hilarious. It's hilarious. It's educational. It's insane to see how little humanity has really changed over the years, how just ridiculous people are able to get away with ridiculous things just because, and I love it. It's so good. I've seen the Dollop live. They go on tour and they do live stage shows where they, it's just a podcast, but it's funny, it's great, and they release those episodes in their podcast feed, but because of the pandemic, they hadn't been doing it. Way back before the pandemic, back when I was living in Denver, this is probably about 2016 or so, I got to see the Dollop live and in person, and it was great. I also know Gareth Reynolds, who is the co-host. He's been on old podcasts of mine many times. I've had the opportunity to hang out with him a few times, and he is a funny dude, a great dude, and he plays the perfect foil for these insane stories from history, and I love it so much. So number 5, I've been binging. So it's like these are shows that I will binge. Didn't mention that, these top 5. I mean, yes, I've binged all of these. Well, actually, one of them I haven't binged, but just because I've listened to all of the episodes already anyway. And it's a different format, but Dollop is one that I binge. I will go back and listen to them. If you've ever seen the documentary Tickled, they did a podcast on that led to the documentary being made. I believe we're the chain of events for that, which is a crazy documentary about competitive tickling. But yeah, the Dollop is an amazing, if you like history, you want to get to know history. It's primarily American history, but when they go on tour, like they'll do Australian and UK and Canada, different types of history, different stories from different parts of the world. And if you like history and you like laughing, you like comedy, I highly recommend checking out, subscribing to The Dollop with Dave Anthony and Gareth Reynolds. Do it now. Subscribe. Number 4, coming in at my number 4 favorite podcast of 2021 is the podcast that I've been subscribed to and listened to for years, many, many years, and is a show that I have a premium access to Stitcher in order to have access to the complete library of this podcast, which goes back like 2008 maybe is when he started. And that podcast is Doug Loves Movies, hosted by Doug Benson. It is a movie trivia show where Doug Benson, who's a stand-up comedian, hilarious comedian, has, 2 to 3 to 4 guests on, usually live in front of an audience, but because of the pandemic, he moved the shows to Zoom, which I still enjoy that format of the show. But what I've been doing is going back to old episodes. I think I started around 2012, and I've just been re-listening to old episodes of Doug Loves Movies. It is amazing to time travel back to a time where things were much different than they are today, and listen to people talk about movies that had just been released, which is a lot of fun. So you get a lot of different movie conversations than you would get today, and I love it so much. It's such a fun show. It is, one of my top. Obviously, it's my number 4 favorite podcast of the year, but it's one of those shows that I can put on. It's similar to Impractical Jokers a lot of the time, where I can just put it on. I don't necessarily need to be paying attention to anything because it's just movie trivia and people, riffing and having fun and telling jokes. But it makes me laugh. It makes me laugh. I really enjoy it, and I love movies too. So, movie trivia aspect of it is fun, and just movie talk in general I love listening to. So that is why Doug Loves Movies is coming in at number 4. The Many Faces is an ongoing abstract ink portrait series that I started many years ago. I release a new face every day, but go to inspireddisorder.com to check them out. So many available. But as a listener to The Ray Taylor Show, you can save 10% when you use coupon code INSPIRED when you check out. So go to inspireddisorder.com/TMF, that stands for The Many Faces. Go check them out, browse the entire collection, and when you decide on a piece, or maybe multiple pieces, make sure you use coupon code INSPIRED when you check out, and you'll save 10%. As a big thank you for checking out my work, for collecting my work, and for listening to The Ray Taylor Show. And with that said, let's get back to the show. My number 3 favorite podcast of 2021 is another podcast that I've literally gone back through the entire library and binged it from start to current multiple times. It's a banger in every episode. It is a show that inspired Top 5. It is one of the shows that inspired Top 5. This is a show where the host and guests draft things from a specific category, and that podcast is called All Fantasy Everything. All Fantasy Everything, just a great podcast. Ian Carmel is the host. Sean Jordan, David Bory, Mars Mel is the producer. They have guests on, usually other comedians, but the core group is Sean, David, and Ian. Great, hilarious guys, hilarious stand-up comedians. A show that did not miss a beat whatsoever during the pandemic. A show that I love the creativity, I love the comedy, I love the positive energy that they put out. It is a show that I've literally gone back through and listened to multiple times. I love going back and listening to old episodes. They're evergreen in the best ways. Some of my favorite episodes, they do a draft where they draft Taco Bell items. Like, you cannot listen to that episode and not crave Taco Bell. They have one where they draft the mall, like things from the mall. One of the most recent drafts that they did were I forget. What movies you'd like to see Nicolas Cage in? Like, they do some crazy drafts. They've also done favorite Christmas music drafts. They've done favorite video games. They've done just kind of wacky, any kind of idea sandwiches. They've drafted sandwiches. I love this. I love the show. Like I said, the creativity. It's hilarious. They are so funny. Production is top notch. Mars Mel is a master podcast producer, in my opinion. So good, so fun, and a podcast. Like I said again, you can go back and re-listen to old episodes, and it's like Seinfeld. It's like they just never get old. They're kind of long, which is nice. They're like 2 to 3 hours long. I think more hour and a half to 2 hours, but there's a few that have gone long. I love it so much. So check it out if that sounds interesting. So it's like they'll have a topic, right? Like breakfast foods. And then they'll figure out the order that they go in. And then it's serpentine style. So whoever chooses first in the first round will choose fourth in the second round. And they just go through and they draft items in this category. And it's a lot of fun. It is so much fun. And it's really funny to hear some of the picks people have, how outrageous they are. But anyway, highly recommend checking it out. All Fantasy Everything, one of my all-time favorite podcasts to listen to. My number 2 favorite podcast of 2021. This is a podcast that inspired my second return to podcasting. This is a podcast that each member of which has been a huge influence on me podcasting at all. And they have survived and grown and adapted and are under a new name now. And my number 2 favorite podcast of 2021 is the Filmcast. It used to be the /Filmcast, but they parted ways with /Film, which is a movie news website, and they went out on their own. It's hosted by David Chen, Devinder Hardawar, and Jeff Kanata. Jeff Kanata is from a podcast, Totally Rad Show, which was one of the first podcasts I ever got into, and a podcast that inspired the Billy Dallas Show, which I did 6 episodes of, which was my first podcast ever. And later, many years later, he became part of the Filmcast crew as the third person. Sometimes they have guests on. They do a movie review in every episode. So whatever new big movie is out, whether it's in theaters or streaming, they will review it. And then they will talk about other things that they've watched throughout the week. And their conversations on movies are amazing. The discourse they have, the disagreements they have. It's interesting to see which one of the 3 becomes the dissenter in the opinions. A lot of the times it's David Chen, who is the one person who either loves or hates a movie, despite popular opinion on the show. Sometimes it's Devindra. Sometimes Devindra will come out of nowhere and just really back a movie that sometimes is crazy. But I love all their opinions. Jeff is kind of floats between the two as well. Like there's definitely some reviews. Like I've been listening to their opinions on movies since I don't know, 2008. I think I started. I mean, it was before that for Totally Rad Show, maybe 2006, 2007. I think maybe 2007 when I first started listening Totally Rad or watching Totally Rad Show. But yeah, like in Totally Rad Show, they reviewed movies and video games and other pop culture stuff. So I've literally been listening to these guys for 13 years. And it's been a great ride. I love the work. They do amazing work. David Chen produces. I think they get some people to edit sometimes. Beatty Zhang, I think, helps produce the show at times. But a great show, consistently amazing, great conversations. If you love movies, you want to get opinions on the newest movies, I highly recommend checking it out. It's great. It's such a great show, and it's been fun to see not only the evolution of that show, but like the evolution of those people, like the difference. It's been 13 years. David and Devindra and Jeff, they've all changed. We've all changed over 13 years. You can't not. If you haven't changed in 13 years, you're living life wrong. You have to grow, or you're just. I don't know. Anyway. So number 2, my second favorite podcast of 2021 is the /Filmcast. I love it. It's not one that I will necessarily go back unless there's a movie that they review that I haven't seen yet, and then once I see the movie, I will go back and re-listen to their opinions on it. Sometimes I'll just listen to their opinions. Like I listened to their Spider-Man review. I haven't seen the newest Spider-Man, but I know it's going to be a long time, and I don't really care if it's spoiled. I try to avoid spoilers at all costs, but if there's a movie I don't really care about, then I don't mind. But yeah. Number 2, Filmcast. Join Inspired Disorder Plus today. Head on over to inspireddisorder.com/plus to join. Membership includes members-only discounts and deals. You get access to the Ray Taylor Show completely ad-free, as well as bonus episodes. You get access to the complete live painting archive. You also get access to every single podcast ever produced by Inspired Disorder, hosted by Ray Taylor. You get access to Ray Taylor's personal blog, as well as the opportunity to ask me any questions. So if you want to start a podcast, you're into art, ask me anything. And so many more things are being added every day to Inspired Disorder Plus. So sign up today, become a member, head on over to inspireddisorder.com/plus and become an Inspired Disorder Plus member today. My number 1 favorite podcast of 2021 was a new discovery. It was a show that 2 hosts from another podcast that I listen to, the Filmcast, David Chen and Jeff Kanata, were both on different episodes, were guests on this episode, but because they were guests on this episode and mentioned it on the Filmcast, I checked out and instantly fell in love with this show. So coming in at number 1 is my favorite show of 2021, and that show is Screen Drafts. It's similar in a lot of ways to All Fantasy Everything, where they have people on and they draft movies, but it's a little bit different because they're competitively collaborating to make a best of list, usually 7 movies for any given subgenre. So they've done like top 5. Oh my God, I'm blanking. There'll be top 5. I'm like, they've ranked Marvel movies, which is not, those are like the super mega drafts. They've done like top 5 dark Christmas movies, top 5 art house Christmas movies, not top 5s, top 7s, best of lists. They've done Stephen King horror movies. They've done top 7 giallo films. So they're like, one, super educated and knowledgeable about film, and they get people on that are super educated and knowledgeable not only about film but about the specific subgenre of film that is going to be drafted. And because it's more of a game thing where they're competing, so some people have vetoes because they're not making their own list. They are trying to make a list together, but they're competing over, like, if you think this movie is better than this one, you can veto it and then try and get it higher. It's the format is great. It brings amazing drama. There is so much drama that happens because they have to competitively collaborate to make these best of lists, that it just, because it's art has, it's subjective. Everybody's going to have their own opinion. And because of that, you get some wild picks. But this show, Screen Drafts, along with All Fantasy Everything, were the 2 inspirations for me starting to do top 5, which is this show, which is just me ranking things on my own. But I love watching a group of movies in a subgenre and picking out my favorites of it, like just watching them combined, or like watching a series like Mission Impossible, watching the entire franchise and then picking out my top 5. Like when you watch movies in groups like that, it's so much better to like understand the context for everything and follow these storylines that kind of go from movie to movie, or even just tropes that happen from within a subgenre. I love it. I've discovered so many movies, like my favorite thing to do while listening to Screen Drafts. And I literally, when I listened to Jeff Kanata's episode, and I listened to David Chen's episode when they were on, and David Chen drafted with Dan Trachtenberg, who's another host from Totally Rad Show, director of 10 Cloverfield Lane, among other things, episodes of Black Mirror. They went on to draft John Woo films, and then Jeff was on to draft like Sword and Sandal films, and I listened to those, and I fell in love with the show, and I just started from the bottom. And those, you want to talk about a long podcast. I love this podcast because it is so long. It's what I love about audio podcasts, is that that you can put it on, like they're super mega drafts where they're like doing, like when they did all of the MCU films, like one of the long, like 6 to 8 hours long of podcasting. It is great. I love it so much. It is endlessly entertaining. Some of the most educated conversations about movies, about film, especially that specific topic of film, whatever subgenre it is. But then the discovery of new movies. Like, I have this app called Just Watch open, and it's an app that will tell you type in a movie title, and it'll tell you, out of all of the possible movie streaming sites that are available, it will tell you which ones that movie can be found on. And you can also enter in the streaming services you have access to, and it could just narrow it down to tell you if it's on any of those. But it's a great app that helped me populate watch lists and queues on so many different platforms. Tubi has been an amazing service for like obscure movies. And then, of course, Netflix and Hulu and all that stuff. But yeah, I have discovered and reappreciate film in a different way listening to this show. I've learned so much, and it's so entertaining, and I really love it. And it was like a surprise when I started listening to it, and then like just burning through the entire catalog of podcasts. And they're long, like I said. Like, some are like 3 hours for one of these podcasts is like a short podcast, which I absolutely love it. Like, I'll listen to them while I edit. I'll edit the show, and it'll be like what I do on Sunday, listening to an episode or two of Screen Drafts. Great intro music. I love their intro music so much. It really gets you fired up. But yeah, that's my number one favorite podcast of 2021. So if you're a movie fan, which if you enjoy my show, I would assume you like movies, since I do primarily movie reviews most of the time. There's a bunch in this list to choose from. Let me go over the list one more time. My top 5 podcasts of 2021, starting off with number 5, The Dollop, hosted by Dave Anthony and Gareth Reynolds. Number 4 is Doug Loves Movies, who's hosted by Doug Benson. Number 3 is All Fantasy Everything with Ian Carmel, Sean Jordan, David Bory, produced by Mars Mel. You got number 2 is The Filmcast, which is hosted by David Chen, Jeff Kanata, and Devinder Hardawar. And my number 1 favorite podcast of 2021 is Screen Drafts. And the hosts of Screen Drafts, I'm just now realizing that I don't know their names offhand, because I haven't been listening to them for a decade yet. But I will pull it up here, because I want to get their names of Screen Drafts. It is Clay Keller and Ryan Marker are the 2 hosts, and they get on. Billy Ray Bruton is a great guest to be on. Very controversial picks. There are some regulars on that show that are just so much fun to see come on and mix things up. But yeah, Clay Keller and Ryan Marker are the 2 hosts of Screen Drafts. And that is it. That is my top 5 podcasts of 2021. Let me know what your favorite podcasts to listen to are in the comments, or hit me up on social media. That's it. New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere our podcasts are found. Binge the full week over at inspireddisorder.com/plus. Buy Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. And follow the show on Instagram at Ray Taylor Show. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.